Mike Tyson. Just say the name and an image pops into your head, right? A destructive force of nature, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, the baddest man on the planet. But his story is so much more than just knockouts. It's really a deep dive into violence, fame, a total collapse, and then this utterly unexpected redemption.
And that's the real puzzle here, isn't it? His life is one of the most fascinating transformations you'll ever see in public life. I mean, how does a guy who personified pure, raw aggression find his way to philosophy and vulnerability? So that's the journey we're going to dive into.
I mean, look at this. It really lays out the two halves of one single life. On one side, you have the persona forged in the ring, a figure of pure fear and intimidation. And on the other, the man who kind of rose from the ashes, thoughtful, open, and searching. Mike Tyson's entire story is basically the journey from one side of the screen to the other.
So where do we even begin? Well, to understand the monster, you first have to understand the boy. See, Tyson wasn't born a killer. He was made into one, forged in the fires of one of New York's absolute toughest neighborhoods.
You gotta picture this. Growing up in Brownsville, Tyson was actually shy. He had a lisp, which made him a super easy target for bullies. The source of that legendary fury wasn't ego, it was pain. The switch finally flipped when a bully killed one of his beloved pigeons. For the first time, he just unleashed his fists, and in that moment, he discovered a power that would go on to define and nearly destroy his entire life. By the time he was just 13 years old, he had been arrested, get this, 38 times. A kid.
But all that raw power, it was just aimless. Until a legendary trainer named Cus D'Amato found him. And Cus didn't just teach Tyson how to box. He gave him a whole system, a philosophy. This style, the peekaboo, was absolutely perfect for Tyson's body type. It turned his short stature into a huge advantage, letting him get inside and unleash those devastating combos.
And this quote, man, this really gets to the heart of their whole relationship. Cus, who eventually became Tyson's legal guardian, totally understood the rage that was burning inside this young man. See, he didn't try to put that fire out. No way. Instead, he taught Tyson how to harness it, how to turn fear, both his own and his opponents, into fuel. He basically taught him how to become the master of that fire instead of its victim.
And the result of all that? Well, at just 20 years old, Tyson reached the absolute pinnacle of the sport. He knocked out Trevor Berbick to become the youngest heavyweight champion ever. That's a record that still stands to this day. Incredible. The boy from Brownsville, molded by Cus D'Amato, was now the king of the world. But here's the tragedy. The man who put him on that throne was gone. D'Amato had died just a year earlier.
And, without his mentor, without that father figure, that moral compass, the fire that Cus had taught him to control, it just started to burn everything down. This is where the story takes its dark and pretty much inevitable turn.
With Cus gone, it was like a perfect storm of bad influences and terrible decisions. You had the tumultuous, very public marriage to Robin Givens, the infamous promoter Don King driving a wedge between Tyson and his original disciplined team. And without that core structure, Tyson's technique just fell apart. He stopped being a brilliant boxer and just became a brawler, relying on pure brute force. And all of that led to what is still one of the biggest upsets in the history of sports, period. In Tokyo, a 42-1 underdog named Buster Douglas did the unthinkable. He knocked out Mike Tyson. Just like that, the aura was gone. The baddest man on the planet had been beaten, and the freefall was just getting started.
So what happened after that Douglas fight? You might expect a comeback story, right? Nope. What happened was a lightning-fast descent into pure chaos, transforming Tyson from a flawed champion into a genuine public villain.
Just look at this timeline. The next decade was just a complete spiral of self-destruction. 2 years after Tokyo, a rape conviction sent him to prison. After he got out, his shot at redemption against Evander Holyfield ended with his most infamous act, the infamous moment where he bites Holyfield's ear. And by 2003, even though he'd earned over $300 million, he was bankrupt, a complete and total collapse.
It all came to an end in 2005, not with a bang, but with a whimper. He actually quit on his stool against a journeyman fighter, and what he said afterwards, man, it said everything. That fire Cus D'Amato had so carefully built and controlled, it had finally burned itself out.
Now, for pretty much any other athlete, that would be it. End of story, a tragic footnote. But for Mike Tyson, this was somehow the beginning of his most fascinating chapter, a second act that absolutely nobody saw coming.
So how did he do it? Well, his reinvention didn't happen overnight. It came in these distinct stages. It kind of started with him learning to laugh at himself, with that hilarious cameo in The Hangover. Then came brutal, radical honesty, with his one-man Broadway show, where he just laid his entire disastrous life out for everyone to see. And then, something unexpected happened. He found his voice on his podcast, Hotboxing, revealing a man who was reflective, curious, and on a real search for peace.
You see, here's the key to his whole redemption. It wasn't about trying to convince us he was some perfect guy now. It was the complete opposite. It was about owning every single mistake, every ugly moment, and showing the world his vulnerability. He stopped fighting the monster in his past, and instead, he started talking to it. And by doing that, he finally started to become whole.
And through all this, we can't forget the fighter. We just can't. I mean, look at these numbers. They're just staggering. A testament to the sheer destructive force he was in his prime. A nearly 90% knockout rate is just, it's almost unheard of. He was a true phenomenon. But you could argue his greatest legacy has nothing to do with what happened inside the ring.
So in the end, Mike Tyson's crazy life really leaves us with this one big question. Think about it. He conquered every single opponent he faced in his prime, but for decades, he was getting destroyed in the war against himself. His story proves that the toughest opponent any of us will ever face is the one staring back at us in the mirror, and that victory, no matter how late it comes in life, is the only one that really truly matters.